On what seemed like a harmless school trip, a young guide leads a group of kids into one of the most dangerous caves in the American heartland. They were expecting a calm, easygoing adventure, but within hours, excitement turns into panic. What was supposed to be a simple expedition quickly becomes a race against time, the cold, and as you'll soon see, the human body itself. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Abyssin. Sit back and get comfortable because today we're diving into another cave exploration story that went horribly wrong. And of course, if you enjoy this kind of content, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps out. On April 9th, 2005, a 20-year-old named Richard Harness led a group of 12 excited kids deep into one of the most infamous and treacherous caves in the region, Devil's Den Cave. Richard believed he had enough experience to guide the school activity through the twisting underground tunnels beneath the Ozark Mountains. He had been there before, and that familiarity gave him confidence. Maybe too much. As Richard gave a safety briefing to the group, Melissa Jones, a fellow instructor, waited outside the cave. She was scheduled to lead a second group of students later that day. The weather outside was pleasant, around 68 degrees Fahrenheit, but inside, between the limestone passages, the air held steady at 55 degrees, just cold enough to slowly leach warmth from the body. The kids, ranging in age from 8 to 12, were buzzing with excitement as they strapped on helmets and flicked on their headlamps. None of them had ever explored a real natural cave before. Their only experiences underground had been at tourist caves with paved walkways and bright overhead lighting. Richard carried a small backpack stocked with bottled water, granola bars, a basic first aid kit, and spare batteries. It was everything he thought he'd need for a short 3-hour trip. But what he didn't consider was the fact that since his last visit 6 months earlier, he had gained about 15 pounds. It didn't seem like a big deal when he volunteered for the trip, but it would soon prove critical. By 11:30 a.m., the group had already navigated a series of increasingly tight horizontal tunnels. The kids, being small and light, had no trouble squeezing through narrow spaces. Richard, on the other hand, often had to exhale fully and twist his body just to keep moving. Every challenge they overcame gave him a false sense of confidence. Then they reached a tougher obstacle, a vertical crack, roughly 10 inches wide and 6 feet tall, that connected two horizontal tunnels. Shining his flashlight through, Richard could see that the tunnel on the other side opened up slightly, wide enough for someone his size to crawl on their knees. He liked to call that space a chamber, even though it was really just a slightly wider stretch of tunnel. Richard remembered passing through this spot before and decided it was safe enough. He let the children go first while he stayed behind to supervise. One by one, the kids turned sideways and squeezed through the narrow fissure. Their slim bodies scraped against the cold rock, and a few of them groaned at the feel of the rough limestone against their ribs and spines. But they all made it through and crawled ahead, lighting up the tight tunnel with their headlamps. Then it was Richard's turn. He rotated his body and began sliding into the gap. Almost immediately, he noticed the walls felt tighter than he remembered. His chest pressed against one side and his back against the other. Still, he kept going, sucking in his stomach and forcing himself forward. But midway through, he got stuck. The passage narrowed in such a subtle way that his hips, a few inches wider than his chest, couldn't pass. When he tried to back out, he found that the angle trapped him. He was stuck. Unable to move forward or backward, his chest compressed and his breathing labored, Richard was hit with a wave of panic. His heart pounded. He could barely breathe. Even worse, 12 children were now stranded on the other side, out of reach from any help, all because of his mistake. His body had become the very wall blocking their escape. On the other side, the kids' excitement turned to fear. They watched in disbelief as their adult guide became wedged in the stone. Some of them froze, unsure of what to do. Others started to cry quietly. The older ones crawled back toward the crack, trying to see how Richard was doing. What they saw was terrifying. He was completely motionless, locked in the narrow vertical gap, unable to move an inch. The sense of safety they felt just from being with an adult vanished in an instant. If he couldn't save himself, who would save them? Meanwhile, outside the cave, Melissa Jones checked her watch. There were still over 3 hours to go before the group was expected back at 3 p.m. Oblivious to the crisis unfolding underground, she enjoyed the spring sun, occasionally glancing toward the cave entrance, waiting for the kids to return on time. Inside, the first 30 minutes were filled with frantic attempts by Richard to free himself, but every push only seemed to wedge him deeper. His hips had become an anchor. The children, growing more distressed, watched helplessly. Richard's movements slowed, his breathing became shallower, and as the minutes passed, the cold air began to take its toll. With no room to move, their bodies began losing heat. Despite his own worsening condition, Richard still gave instructions. He told the kids to huddle together to try to preserve body warmth. But Richard's physical state was declining fast. His legs, hanging freely below the point of entrapment, began to go numb. Circulation was failing. It was the beginning of a dangerous condition known as crush syndrome, which can be fatal when blood flow is cut off for extended periods. After 2 hours, the air inside the cave was changing. The first symptoms began to appear: headaches, dizziness, nausea. Their bodies were warning them that the air was growing stale. Outside, Melissa still had no idea what was happening. The group wouldn't be considered missing until after their scheduled return time, and that time was fast approaching. By hour 3, some of the children stopped moving. Their water supply was nearly gone, and dehydration was speeding up the effects of hypothermia. 2 of the youngest kids even drifted off to sleep, despite efforts from the others to keep them awake, a deeply worrying sign that their body temperatures were falling dangerously low. At exactly 3 p.m., Melissa realized something was wrong. She immediately alerted park rangers, who began organizing a search, but precious hours had already been lost, time during which the situation underground had become much more severe. When rescuers finally located the group, they were horrified. Richard was jammed tight in the vertical fissure, completely drained. The kids were all stuck behind him, unable to exit or even be reached. The first attempts to free him were disastrous. Park rangers and local firefighters, untrained in cave rescue, used sledgehammers and chisels to try to break the rock. Every blow echoed violently through the cave, threatening to destabilize the structure. One rescuer even broke his hand with a poorly aimed strike. It was clear this job needed more than brute force. 2 hours later, a specialized rescue team from Washington County arrived. They quickly recognized that breaking the rock was too risky. Instead, they focused on Richard himself. Using nylon rescue webbing, common in climbing and emergency operations, they created harness loops under his arms. In a coordinated effort, they managed to lift Richard just a few inches, enough to reach a slightly wider part of the fissure. After 5 hours stuck between solid stone, Richard was finally freed. As circulation returned to his legs and lower body, he was hit with waves of searing pain, like thousands of needles piercing him all at once. As he was carried out of the cave, rescuers moved quickly to reach the children. They prioritized the weakest, guiding each one back through the same narrow tunnel with extreme care. The rescue team worked slowly and methodically until all 12 children were finally brought to safety. Outside, medical teams were standing by. 2 of the youngest kids were taken immediately to the hospital. While most of the children were visibly shaken, they responded well to emergency care and were taken to a nearby hospital for evaluation. Thankfully, none of them suffered permanent physical harm. Richard, although he managed to walk out on his own, thanks to a surge of adrenaline, was left with lasting physical and emotional trauma. As for the children, who witnessed their only adult guide trapped and helpless, the psychological scars would take a long time to heal. If you found this story gripping, wait until you check out the one appearing on your screen now. A tale that starts just as innocently but ends in a far darker way. Be sure to like the video and subscribe if you enjoyed it. Your support really means a lot. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.